Hello, good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you are. And thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Teona Sechniashvili. I am Europe Advocacy Officer at the International Press Institute, which is a global media freedom organization based in Vienna. And this webinar, this discussion is hosted by Media Freedom Rapid Response Consortium in partnership with PEN International. The Media Freedom Consortium is a Europe-wide mechanism that promotes and defends journalists' rights and media freedom across European Union member states and candidate countries. And PEN International is a global association of leading journalists and writers primarily that defends freedom of expression and promotes literature worldwide. So thank you again. In today's discussion, we are once again focusing on Georgia, shining a spotlight on Georgia. Georgia was once regarded even as a beacon of democracy in the region in terms of championing human rights, comparing other countries in the region. But we have witnessed a very strong authoritarian drift in Georgia. In our statements at MFRR, we have consistently written that Georgia is moving closer to authoritarianism daily, but it is actually questionable whether Georgia is still moving towards becoming an autocracy, or is it already one. So the Georgian Dream ruling party has been using a lot of tools in its disposal, practically all tools in its disposal, to suffocate and stifle dissent, curtail independent voices, including those of journalists and writers. And they have been entrenching authoritarianism not only through elections, but also through the systemic capture of the judiciary and state institutions. At the Media Freedom Rapid Response, we have documented attacks on 312 journalists just in the last year, during the last year, and among them 31 journalists have been subjected to arbitrary arrests. Journalists are not just being arrested or jailed, but they are the newsrooms and journalists, as well as critics generally and civil society representatives, are facing a lot of different kinds of pressure. So the hostility towards critical voices is manifesting itself in numerous ways: in restrictive legislation, in physical attacks, in online threats. But one needs to also say that there are many people who are standing up to this authoritarian drift, who are opposing it. And one of them is Mzia Amaglobeli. We are marking with this discussion the awarding of Mzia Amaglobeli, jailed veteran Georgian journalist who has been sentenced to 2 years imprisonment. Awarding with the Sakharov Prize, which is the highest European Union human rights prize. She will be awarded next week, actually, in Strasbourg at the European Parliament, and some of us at from the MFRR will be there attending the award ceremony. Among those who are jailed, and I need to make clear that it's very difficult to say how many people are imprisoned, arrested in Georgia on politically motivated charges, because daily protesters, critics are being arrested. And among those is Zviad Ratiani as well. He is one of the most prominent poets in modern day Georgia. And like Mzia, he has been sentenced for 2 years to 2 years imprisonment. We will be also speaking about Zviad Ratiani's case with his colleagues today. So without further ado, I'd like to briefly introduce our speakers and move to the discussion. We have Irma Dimitradze. Irma is a journalist and a communications manager at Batumelebi, and this is the outlet that Mzia Amaglobeli founded in early 2000s, and she has been also managing Batumelebi ever since. Thank you, Irma, for being here with us. We have Khatuna Tzkhadadze. She's the president of PEN Georgia. Welcome, Khatuna. And finally, we have Katia Bashidze. She's a senior human rights officer at the Human Rights House Foundation. Thank you, Katie. Good to have you. So I want to actually ask my first question. Irma, my first question, since I make this introduction about Mzia as well. And again, we are marking Mzia's awarding with today's discussion. Like I said, Irma, sorry, what are the latest updates around Mzia's case, and also her health is further deteriorating? Maybe you can also brief us about that. Thanks.
Hello, thank you for having me and having this panel. And at the beginning, I want to again thank MFRR, ECPMF, and all the press freedom international organizations who have been really helpful in advocating for Mzia and this Sakharov Award that comes not as much of a prize, but as acknowledgement of the struggle that Mzia and all the Georgian journalists and human rights defenders are going through. Is also partially the result of that international advocacy, and it was very important. As for Mzia, as you know, it's yesterday, actually it's December 12th, so it's 11 months that she's been unlawfully imprisoned. She was imprisoned on January 12th this year. As you know, her health deteriorated very badly, and we have been, and her team has been requesting proper medical examination in the clinic of the choice, and in the clinic of the choice, because this clinic was equipped with the equipment that is needed for this her eye condition. Also, it holds the medical history of Mzia, and this was denied for months and months. She was only transferred to the clinic that was chosen by the prison, which recommended the eye surgery, but we didn't want to move forward with this recommendation because we didn't know, we were not fully sure about all the situation with her health. And as well, Mzia had some questions. She didn't even have the consultations face to face with the doctor. So we've been trying, and finally this week, thankfully, we were able to get Mzia to the clinic where they do hold her medical history. It seems that this clinic's findings will be different from what was previously told from the clinic contracted by the prison. So there is no final report provided yet. Doctors are working to, deliver the final report and results. However, the fact remains that she has only 10% in one of her eyes remaining, and another is left on the light perception. Other than that, what do you know is that appellate court upheld the decision of the previous court. So there is not so much of expectations from the judiciary, which is fully captured. However, we continue our fight on all legal grounds as well in Georgia, and there is a case in Strasbourg. There will be additional cases, applications submitted. And as for her, she has this high spirit, and she remains so in the fighting mode. And I don't know, like it's very difficult for us as her colleagues, because our organization, even though it has 2 outlets and 2 offices in 2 biggest cities of the country, it's not like a corporate organization. It's like more like a family organization, where Zia is not just a boss or a colleague, is a family member. And this past 11 months has been really difficult, and probably we will all realize that difficulty later on, because we are still in the process, and it's hard to reflect on. But yeah.
Irma, I actually wanted to ask about this, about what your organization has gone through, because like I said, Georgian journalists and newsrooms are subjected to numerous threats. Journalists are brutally attacked physically. They're arrested arbitrarily on different charges, and then also we are seeing legal harassment. I didn't mention all the. It's impossible, I think, to list all the laws at once. I mean, there are so many restrictive pieces of legislation, and there is also economic retaliation that Georgian Dream has been using against media as well. It seems like your organization was exposed to all of this. So maybe you can also comment on this. And Mzia was not also
Yeah,
the only
yeah,
Maglobeli journalist arrested.
definitely. Yeah. I mean, there's a huge variety of sorts of harassment and attacks that we had to go through. When Mzia was arrested on the same day, just 20 hours later, our cameraman was arrested. Basically while him conducting his job, filming the rally. Um, all his rights were violated. His phone was confiscated, and then it was illegally accessed, and factory swiped, and everything was deleted. He was illegally again and unlawfully ordered to 8 days pretrial detention, and 8 days administrative detention, and he had to spend those 8 days in detention. While in the court hearing, it was very openly and clearly exposed that the police officers who were testifying falsely were contradicting with each other, and there was evidence and everything. We now getting used to it. After that, I think in past 11 months and even before, the statements that come from the ruling party and officials, but obviously it intensified since January of Mzia's arrest. Like the week won't pass without a statement against us, like saying sometimes they call our outlets propagandist or foreign agent, or they're working against the state and so on. Financial and economical restrictions are huge. What they used against us in the summer, actually, it was they chose to this time utilize the tool of tax code and very selectively freeze our accounts for a reason that could be successfully used against any media outlet in Georgia, including the propagandist ones. So it was very clearly, another another attack on against us. Also, they did it before one of the main court hearings of Mzia. It was obvious harassment and intimidation attempt. That we are not able to receive grants anymore. That going and reporting from the field is very much dangerous and everyday risk that journalists have to take in Georgia. So there is nothing different in our case. But every step that we make now is something. Every media outlet is in difficult situation in Georgia, but because Mzia was arrested, it's like having everything that we do needs to be assessed twice, because they can use it against Mzia as well, because Mzia is a co-owner of the organization, and whatever you do could be translated into new charges against her. We had this fear for a very long time that they could start another investigations, and actually in February, in late January, early February, investigator in Mzia's case came up with some insane reports saying that he was informed that Mzia attacked a police officer based on the orders from someone which was received via phone communication, and that's how they very easily accessed the court order to access her personal phone. And until very recently, this phone was under the examination, and there was no results. Finally, later, during the appellate court hearings, they said that there was no deep state found there. However, that situation going on was giving us this fear that anytime they could, just trump another charges against her. So yeah, it's been very difficult. But I think the most difficult was the fact that as I said, because Mzia is so close to us, all of us actually, as a friend and family, when such kind of close person to you is facing the health issues that could be ended in like tragic terms, you stop, feeling other threats like financial or so on. There were months that we are not able to issue the salaries, or there were some invitations or some decisions in our life that we had to make differently given the situation. Like we had to change our own personal lives as well. But as I said, all of the Mzia situation, her health issue, because she went 38 days hunger strike, and that destroyed her health. And at the past 2 weeks, doctors were saying that if she wouldn't stop, like it could basically end fatally. So all of those things, and then her losing the eyesight, it all very much downplayed all other threats. But obviously, if you think rationally about all those things that are going on, it's like insane. But as I said, we are still in the process. So in the process, the adrenaline, everything happening very quickly, you don't have much time to reflect on the impact of this scale of attacks and persecution.
Thank you very much, Irma. It goes without saying that we at IPI and MFRR, we stand with Mzia and your team. We launched Free Mzia Today campaign already, I think it was February, and since we've been very actively advocating, basically since her arrest, we've been advocating for her release. Mzia is received many international media freedom awards, including those was IPI IMS Press Freedom Hero Award. And yeah, we keep working on this case. It's one of our priority cases, and we'll definitely keep a close eye on it. I'll get back to you because I would like to hear more about this really extraordinary resilience that your colleagues, yourself, and Georgian journalists have demonstrated. But now I wanted to also ask Khatuna, like I said, Mzia received a lot of international attention, and she became a symbol for fighting for media freedom, for freedom of expression, and generally democracy, for democratic freedoms. PEN International also launched its annual Imprisoned Writers campaign recently, highlighting the deteriorating situation of freedom of expression in Georgia, and particularly the case of Mzia. Can you briefly comment on this campaign as well? Thanks.
Hello again, thank you. Thank you for inviting me in this panel. And yes, we all know that every day, writers and journalists are detained and harassed and persecuted all over the world, or even killed for just the reason of just the practice of their profession. So that was the reason why in 1981, PEN International Writers Imprisonment Committee, actually PEN International has different committees, but thematic committees. And they started the Day of Imprisoned Writer, which is observed each year on November 15. And each year on this day, PEN International honors writers who were detained, unjustly detained or persecuted. And PEN International raises awareness on their cases, campaigns against abuses, and calls on governments for imprisoned writers released. And writers and journalists goes together. It also demands investigations into cases of torture, disappearances, and even killings, sadly. This year, from November 15 to December 10, PEN International launched this campaign of solidarity, which with 4 inspiring people. Journalists from Venezuela, Rory Branker, journalist from Venezuela, and 2 writers from China and Algeria, Yalkan Bozdi, I don't want to mispronounce their names, and Mohamed Hadjadid from Algeria, and Mzia Amaglobeli from Georgia. So journalists and writers who continue to speak truth in the face of awful repression. And PEN International family with several centers worldwide, encouragement and halt to persecuted writers and their families. And those who want to participate actually in how the campaign can do it in several ways. For example, I will be talking in this case. You can just go on PEN International page and find this campaign and write a message of hope from Mzia Amaglobeli, or write to the Georgian authorities and or diplomatic missions, and just reach out to diplomatic contacts which you may have throughout the world, and or share this campaign on social media and spread the word about Zviad Amaglobeli's case on social media. So by raising international awareness of imprisoned writers' cases and showing solidarity to them and their families, very important, showing solidarity to their families too. PEN International prevents the courageous, brave, and thus absolutely, let's say, priceless voices from being silent. So these campaigns are really very important chance for us to demonstrate our work and to really become part of solidarity actions worldwide, which we all know are so very important.
Thank you very much, Khatuna. For a second, there was some interruption. I think there was some issues with your connection.
Okay.
Yeah, but
can you hear me? Yeah.
We can hear you, but sometimes I have difficulties hearing you.
I'm sorry for that.
If
Mhm.
I hope it gets better.
Should
Is it
I-
just me, or others also have the same issue? You have the
should
same
I-
issue? Okay.
Was it possible to hear me? I don't know.
Now it's a
Is
bit
that-
better, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe you can try without earphones, actually. I mean, mostly it's recommended to use earphones,
Mhm.
but if you could try
Yeah,
with headphones.
I have. Yeah, I think it should be okay because I don't really think that here. Can you hear me now? Maybe
Yes, we can hear you, but sometimes
There's echo
Yeah,
with
there
the
is
it's a
headphone.
bit weird. Yeah.
Yeah, because there is some. It's not very silent, the place where I am outside, and so that's why.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
why maybe there is some. Yeah.
Khatuna, I think when you're closer to the screen, we hear better. That's my
Okay.
impression. So maybe we try that.
Okay. Can you hear me better now?
That's true, actually. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Katie. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Then I will ask you also about Zviad Ratiani, who was sentenced to 2 years in prison at the beginning of October. He has been an outspoken critic of the Georgian Dream regime, and he has faced pressure actually by Georgian authorities over the years. It's not that he was attacked only now. And your organization, like PEN Georgia as well as PEN International, have called for his release consistently. Can you tell us a bit? Actually, I'm very biased because Zviad Ratiani is also one of my favorite poets, really an outstanding author and translator. Can you tell us about Zviad's work and activism, repeated targeting he faced by the Georgian Dream regime, and his unlawful imprisonment?
You're definitely not alone. I mean, if Zviad Ratiani is your favorite poet, he's definitely one of the most influential authors, influential poet, if not the most, of his generation in Georgia. So he is a precious friend of ours, and so he's a very important person for many reasons. So Zviad Ratiani is, for those who don't know much about him, he's an award-winning Georgian poet and translator, and he's published several poetry collections and works and translations from English and German poetry. I mean, translating English and German poetry, including works like T.S. Eliot, Frost, Rilke, Celan, and many others. And his works are translated into several languages, like German, English, French, Russian, Ukrainian, Latvian, Azerbaijani, and many others. And on October 9, in fact, as you mentioned, 2025, Tbilisi City Court sentenced him to 2 years of imprisonment for resistance, and they call it resistance, threat, or violence against a public official. That's how it was classified under Article 353 of the Georgian Criminal Code. Ratiani was detained by police on June 23 after he slapped a policeman while taking part in a protest outside the parliament in Tbilisi, and faced absolutely disproportionate charges of assaulting a police officer, which carry between 4 and 7 years in prison, but then his charges were reduced to 2 years. And PEN International and PEN Georgia reviewed actually the video footage, well known that video footage of the incident, which showed that slap caused no harm to the policeman, and the policeman who was involved in this incident, and he sustained no injuries. So members of literary community in Georgia have rallied more than once actually in support of Zviad, but I mean, no, our requests for release on bail were all denied, so we didn't get any result in that. So Ratiani has been actually repeatedly targeted by state and non-state actors also in recent years, because already on November last year, 2024, PEN Georgia, well, we also that footage too, the brutal beating of Zviad Ratiani, which happened by police in Tbilisi. He suffered serious injuries that time, including fractures to his nose and to his back, and he was sentenced to 8 days of administrative detention by the Tbilisi City Court then. So, and the charges, alleged charges were petty hooliganism, that's how it's classified, was classified back then, and disobeying lawful police orders. So, after his release, Ratiani was attacked close to his house and beaten again outside his home by a known individual. So it's important to mention also that he had previously lived in exile in Austria following a violent incident which happened in 2017, and this incident which involved police again, and which led to his arrest. Speaking in court on October 2, 2025, Ratiani reported being denied access to writing materials in prison, unlike other detainees. And you know how painful and how problematic this may be for a writer. So Zviad's action, this slap which he gave to that policeman, was really a symbolic gesture. And for those who may not know much about Zviad Ratiani, I want to just read a little excerpt from his speech at the court hearing when he addresses the judge, Mr. Gelashvili, and his words, I guess, explain the meaning of his action, his gesture better than anything else. This is Zviad's word which I'm reading. I'm sure you know this word in Georgian, conscious synthesis. He referred to the Georgian word synthesis. It exists in almost every language, usually with the same meaning. And my conscience truly tormented me when I was sleeping in my own bed at home, eating in my own house, working on the useless text of mine, surrounded by the care of the woman I love. I was enjoying time with my wonderful children, while young people their age and even younger were being arrested. The best hours of their lives are taken away, their days, their months, and I hope it won't become years of their lives stolen. I watched all this and it tormented me, not because I'm better than anyone. Everyone on our side knows that we are not fighting for ourselves. Those who fight for personal gain are on your side, he said to the judge. I don't consider the slap I gave to the policeman to be something to be proud of or something shameful, nor a crime, considering that we are living in an absurd. Because injustice rules in our country largely because of few And by you, I don't mean only you personally, Mr. Gelashvili, but the institution you serve. Mzia Amaglobeli knew that there should be added political meaning to that slab. And yes, this is exactly the kind of symbolism I'm made of, the kind of person I am, shaped by this way of thinking. I'm absolutely convinced that this struggle is for our children as well. This fight, the struggle is for our children as well. Just as it is for my kids, Lexo and Nina. Sorry, for your children, addressing the Dutch, for your children as well, just as it is for my kids, Lexo and Nina. I know this with certainty, and I believe you know it too. And if I don't, if you don't, then it turns out I have had a higher opinion of you than you have yourself. Whatever decision you announce today, and this is not some poetic self-sacrificial nonsense I'm saying, my own future will be still lighter, even enviable, compared to the future of those who either actively serve this injustice or support it through their silence. So I think, well, I just wanted to report these words in the court hearing, because this is the kind of man we now have in prison, labeled as a hooligan, as a danger to the state and to the stability of the country. And we'll do everything in our power to just make sure that his voice is heard constantly. It's heard outside until justice prevails in Georgia. And I want to thank you guys, first of all, journalists, because we all organizations, all NGOs are targeted now in Georgia, and then we're in a position of just in which we physically can't work and do projects and do whatever our mission is. But you journalists are let's say the first line, those who really are targeted the most and in the first place. And so we are absolutely helpless without your bravery, without your courage. And if the writers can just use some symbolic gestures of protest, you are doing a different job. You're doing really, the real job. And we're so infinitely grateful to you for that.
Thank you very much, Hatuna. It's really for this also moving words of Zviad, and we really hope that we'll see Zviad, Mzia, and all these people who are jailed for speaking up free. So thanks again. And I want to move to Katy with this. Like Hatuna also mentioned that Zviad Ratiani had to move into exile in 2017 because he faced police violence. He was targeted by the authorities. When we speak about Georgia, we always say that this crackdown is really extraordinary, unprecedented, because the rate is really alarming. However, the situation was never rosy in terms of the freedom of expression in Georgia. And I basically wanted to ask you to walk us through the general freedom of expression concerns that your organization, the Watchdogs, have been seeing over years. What have been the biggest challenges, but also how did the situation change in the last year and a half when then the Georgian dream, fully tightened its grip on dissent?
Thank you. 2021 is probably the year which was a major turning point, when many of us realized that the assaults on civic space, on freedom of expression, were not really part of the glitch to the system, but were the system itself. So there were two major dramatic events happening in 2021. The first was the infamous Gavrilov's Night, where for the first time the ruling regime has used 800 rubber bullets against largely peaceful protesters who were up to 15,000 on Rustaveli Avenue in front of the parliament in June. And then there were journalists who were there. There were journalists who were wearing the badges where they were identifiable. and they were still beaten, they were still assaulted and harassed, and their cameras have been destroyed. Then there was 2021, 5 July, which was the attempt at the Pride March in Tbilisi, where the large, violent, chauvinistic, homophobic crowd attacked over 50 journalists, which resulted in beatings, which resulted in serious injuries, and one cameraman was deceased eventually. So these were the events which really convinced us that being a journalist was not safe anymore, like doing your journalistic work was not physically safe anymore. But that was not the isolated incident. There was a whole string of events that have been happening before. So in this fateful 2021, again, by the way, we issued a report where we wrote that Georgia, in terms of the environment for human rights defenders, was at an early warning stage, which meant that also freedom of expression was deteriorating. And we were seeing the steady decline in terms of protection of fundamental freedoms. So just to give us this rundown of what was happening before the legislative avalanche, which eventually led us to at least legislative authoritarianism in Georgia in the past 2 years. So if you would stand in the street with a blank page in your hand, peacefully in front of the parliament, if you would attempt to erect a tent in the backyard of the parliament, by the way, which is guaranteed by the freedom of expression, if you would shout criticism at the prime minister through a loudspeaker behind a very tall iron gate, you could be detained, you could be arrested. If you were a member of artistic circle, cultural worker, if you were a film director, if you would do something that infuriates the culture ministry or uncover corruption or really target the ruling party, you could be banned, you could be defunded, you could be fired. If you were a journalist or an activist uncovering corruption, you would be targeted by strategic lawsuits against public participation. There was a whole coalition against SLAPS, which was built in Georgia because the cases were so numerous. There was dozens and dozens of cases taken by the ruling party representatives at the level of prime minister, at the level of the mayor of Tbilisi, but also by the various local authorities across regions of Georgia against activists and journalists who would uncover corruption, and they would basically be accused of defamation and would very swiftly be sanctioned with large fines. There were teachers that have been targeted, there were whistleblowers that were targeted. So already there was this trend of less and less tolerance of any dissent in the country. The ombudsperson, who back then was entirely independent and really a vocal critique of government's anti-human rights record, the institution was targeted. And of course, human rights defenders and journalists were suffering from brutal smear campaign, which was ongoing from the very beginning, from 2013, 14, 15. But I think this major boiling point also, which only got worse and worse after that, was just in the build-up of presidential elections in 2018. I'm sorry, I'm really bad with the date, so I hope it's 2018, when in September, just several months before the presidential elections, several NGOs issued a report and a statement saying that there was a state capture by the ruling party, and this stream of smear was horrifying against the civil society, against journalists, against human rights defenders. So it's only got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then what we saw around this year's was that and also our research showed that still the vast, primarily the monopoly over the use of physical violence against dissenting voices was within the hands of far-right groups, non-state actors, who were obviously operating by the tacit approval of the authorities all the time and without any accountability. After 5 July 2021 Tbilisi pogrom, there were over 30 individuals who were actually charged. However, they were only the executors. The instigators of violence have never been punished, and many of them have actually been released early, just like we've seen in some other authoritarian regimes, the pardoning of individuals who commit crimes which the regime likes. So there has been no accountability, but then starting from 2023, but in particular from 2024, 2025, this, and this is also in line with the authoritarian tendency, the monopoly over violence really moved exclusively into the hands of the authorities. It was no longer outsourced. It was firmly within the hands of the law enforcement. And of course, in the last 2 years, we have witnessed like so many laws that target freedom of expression. There are like limitations as to court coverage. There are actual investigations against media. There are journalists and media workers. There is Mzia Amaglobeli behind bars. There are writers, actors behind bars for using their freedom of expression. We have the content regulation by the legislator for the first time in Georgia, where the Communications Commission can actually enter into the analysis of the content of the broadcasting media. We have basically a ban on the operation of independent, at least non-governmental media within the parliament, and you name it. So there is this tendency that began particularly in 2018, really aggravated in 2021, and it should have inevitably, just we were warning in 2021, there was an early warning stage. It was steadily, constantly deteriorating without ever improving. So I think the state that we reached in a way was inevitable, though of course, due to the gravity and the entirely different legal and political dimension that this foreign agent law narrative brought in 2024 was still probably something that was quite difficult to anticipate. But in a way, it was quite logical. So nowadays, we basically have the environment when LGBTQI freedom of expression is basically obliterated. We have a situation when showing up on the pavement in front of the parliament, with or without a face mask, actually, and it will soon, of course, be voted in the parliament, could lead to administrative detention or a criminal imprisonment for a year. And we have the situation that the three independent broadcasting media who are not affiliated with the government are suffering to survive. And we are really witnessing the situation when things will probably get worse before they get better. Though we have this discussion as to how they might get better later on. So I will maybe stop here.
Thank you very much, Katy, for this very comprehensive overview and for kind of explaining that all this didn't really happen in a day. Thanks for that. But also the situation globally changed, right? And we see the rise of far right everywhere. We see the rise of liberalism and authoritarianism globally and also in the region. So Georgia is arguably using this authoritarian playbook, very, Russia-style authoritarian playbook to stifle dissent and curtail independent voices. How does the situation compares to broader regional trends? Like, if you can comment on this also really briefly. It's a big question, but we don't have much time.
Yes, I will try to be very brief and just to say that we do witness the overspill of the liberalism and authoritarianism within the region. I think it was no accident then that the what I would call the first a crack within the, however faulty it was, the Georgian democracy was the abduction of the Azerbaijani journalist Afgan Mukhtarli in broad daylight in the center of Tbilisi. And I think it only got worse and worse after that, unfortunately. So its authoritarianism is never contained within its borders. And authoritarians also learn from each other. So we see that, for example, this anti-LGBTQI and anti-civil society legislation that Georgia has adopted, it's like basically this oath of allegiance to the Russian-style authoritarianism. We witness the instrumentalization and misuse of criminal legislation against civil society who acts within law, who exercises their legitimate activities in supporting the victims of protests, who tries to volunteer during protests to protect individuals against the use of, now that we've learned, maybe allegedly even chemical weapons. So to use the criminal legislation against them and to accuse them of something which is by definition not a crime, but then you wrongfully apply the respective article that you find relevant from the criminal legislation, which is very much what Russia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus have been doing. Obviously, the strategic lawsuits against public participation have been a prevalent trend in the wider European region, not just Eastern Europe or South Caucasus. We see the unlawful detentions of journalists, and I think it's not by chance that there are two journalists, Mzia and a Belarusian journalist, who have received Sakharov Prize by the European Parliament. So this is also the acknowledgement of the targeting of media and the journalists within the region. There is, like in Azerbaijan, for example, there is no independent media outlet remaining inside the country. Everything has been taken down. And these legislative tools, unlawful detentions, smear campaign, and propaganda, it's just this very well practiced toolbox, and of course, crackdown on protest as well and the freedom of expression. After this latest legislative amendments, you could argue that on paper at least, and we know that the practice, at least to a certain degree, will follow, the right to protest is basically gone, because if you don't need anybody's permission to protest, and here you do with the latest amendments, which is very much within the authoritarian playbook. So even within Europe, actually, we witness the narrowing of civic space. So it is a trend. And maybe I would like to mention that, not to be all negative, is that the reason why the civil society and media is targeted is because they're powerful, because what they do matters. And the ones who want to consolidate power want to go after them. So it's not to think that everything is completely lost, it's to think that there is still power in the hands of civil society and media. They have historically epitomized the fight against authoritarianism and the consolidation of power. And that is why the authorities are going after them everywhere. However, just like they learn from each other, the authoritarian regimes, I think we still have an opportunity to learn more and strengthen each other across the border. But again, more about that later.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also, like you mentioned, foreign agent laws are really spreading like wildfire. And of course, they originated in Russia and application of them, like this foreign agent laws originated in Russia, but also in Azerbaijan a few years back, they adopted a very similar legislation as the law on grants, as the current amendments to the law on grants, according to which every organization receiving foreign funding needs government's pre-approval to receive foreign funding. So that's something also what has been existed already in the region. So yes, the autocrats do learn from each other. But let's now speak about how also, like, freedom fighters can learn from each other, and let's speak about resilience that we have seen. Actually, Katie, I want to ask this question to everybody, but yeah, while you're speaking already, I want to hear from you first. Do you think that through this resistance that exists, and also through international community support, this authoritarian drift can be reversed, and what should be done for that?
Yes, I think Georgia is still not a consolidated autocracy. So we are not talking about Georgia in that sense. This is still very much an ongoing struggle. And just to remind ourselves that there's still resistance going inside the country. There is resistance outside the country. There are some successful international litigation efforts to stop the disclosure of sensitive information to government bodies. The NGOs have managed to obtain respective interim measures against the transfer of very sensitive data about women, children, and so on. So there are some mechanisms that are being used. OSCE Moscow mechanism that should uncover and investigate the crimes committed, it's still to be used in its full might, if you like. The litigation within the European Court of Human Rights is ongoing, and then there are some creative ideas as to how to boost those efforts. Georgia has still not overstepped very directly any legal obligation emanating from the European Court of Human Rights. They have really tarnished and slandered the Venice Commission or CEDIR, but the mandatory legal obligations, they have not directly spoken against them. So that is the Rubicon that we know can be crossed from other authoritarian countries, but in Georgia, we still have not gone there. We know that the Georgian civil society is calling for individual sanctions against those who have perpetrated violence, and now also the potential use of chemical weapons against peaceful protesters. Those have not been used in their full might. There is the whole string of international criminal accountability for the crimes like torture, and again, the potential use of chemical weapons, which have not been used yet. And there are documentation efforts, and there are some coalitions that are being established. So there are lots of efforts in that direction. We see that there is resistance, not just in Georgia, but also there is a resistance everywhere to this trend of illiberalism and authoritarianism. And Georgia also, in fact, still to this day at the UN, votes in line with the EU votes. So if you look at the votes in the past year, on every issue, including on human rights issues, Georgia votes in line with the EU. So it's not that it's a complete, it was just Gaza truce vote where Georgia acted differently and went away from what the EU, majority of EU countries have voted for. So it's not that this is a complete, I mean, on paper, Georgia is definitely authoritarianism legislatively, but there is still a long way to go to the end, which we hopefully won't reach. And just a final word from me, I often recall this example that things sometimes change when there is ongoing resistance inside and outside the country. Like year 1989 began with Václav Havel being sentenced for the fourth time criminally in then Czechoslovakia. And then the year 1989 ended the end of December by him being elected as the president of the independent Czechoslovakia. So things do change, and there are still a lot of things that can be done. And I think the focus should be there to do whatever is possible, and maybe also whatever is impossible, because this is not over yet.
Thank you. That's actually really good to hear. And gives me hope. Khatuna, from your perspective, how are Georgian authors showing solidarity? How are they standing up against this authoritarian consolidation, attempt of the consolidation of authoritarianism?
Well, you know, as we all know, writers in Georgia, as everywhere, after all, in the world, they're not a single sort of uniform, homogeneous group, right? Our responses to social injustice, to the suppression of free speech or civil rights or whatever rights, and to the rise of the dictatorship, they're as diverse as our creative voices and the stories actually we tell, right? So among us are those who have become activists actually in the most literal sense, and they stand on Rustaveli Avenue and join the protest every single day to keep this, I would say, flame of resistance alive. And because for them there is just simply no other choice. And one of them is, I absolutely want to mention him and highlight him. One of them is Irakli Lomo, the writer and translator who, despite serious health challenges actually and difficulty in moving and stuff, he has become the face, in a way, face and symbol of this movement. Our, I don't know if I can use this word in English, flag of conscience, and this sort of moral, you know, banner for Georgian literary community over the past year. And there are others who protest, I don't know, whose protests take like different forms, and it's expressed in writing because they too can just do, you know, nothing else, and their words speak just as I don't know, as loud as others. And equally, you know, I want to mention one thing which is absolutely equally vital and powerful, I guess, as a form of protest, which is the boycott, which is embraced by the majority of writers, translators, and publishers, who refuse to participate in cultural projects led by, you know, party-appointed figures, ministers or whatever, and rejecting state-funded initiatives that pretend to support art, but ultimately they all serve a political one-party agenda and actually feed the propaganda machine. So it happened that I was listening to Katie, and that this 2021 was really an infamous year for many reasons, because it started actually something crucial changed in 2021 for us, because the then Minister of Culture, Olgia, tried to openly impose censorship in the field of literature, putting her man in the literary prize jury, literary prize, which was organized by the Writers' House and its then management. And they tried to put their men of party and other members of jury actually refused to be part of this situation, and they just resigned. So it was the first protest when the authors somehow, as a consolidated group, took action against the governmental control and this open sort of step to censorship. And well, as I said, our fight takes many forms, and there is this literal fight, which is the activism in the industries, and there is the fight through words, through courage, the truth telling, actually, and the refusal also to be just refusal to be silenced, and then there is symbolic fight, quieter perhaps, but no less fierce and no less necessary. So, and I really think that this kind of fight, which is, this struggle and this resistance by words, with words, is the kind of resistance which dictatorships normally fear most. And that's why they are so angry to people who seem like not that serious and whose actions seem to be not that much serious. And so, how can I say, courage matters and disobedience matters absolutely, and our raising our voices matter. And this is how we show to our friends and partners beyond Georgia that their solidarity inspires us and strengthens us actually. And well, here my colleagues mentioned that that nothing is particular. I mean, there is nothing which concerns only Georgia in that situation, and then and so we believe that nothing is decided within the borders of a single country anymore. And nowadays, and dictatorships are interconnected. They learn from each other, as you mentioned, and reinforce each other. And that's why, precisely why, those who stand against them must also unite and unite and work together as strongly as possible. So international solidarity now, I know there is a weight and power which like never before, I guess. And that's why we value and cherish every word of support from our partners, fellow writers from other countries, and who help bring to, the Georgian situation to the world's attention.
Thank you so much.
PEN International absolutely stands at the very top of this list, and we want to thank them for this.
Thank you so much, Hatuna. And Irma, I think you said months back at the European Parliament that the bravery is when, it's not the exact citation, sorry for that, but you said something along those lines, that bravery is to keep fighting when there is no hope. What keeps you fighting? Like what?
Yeah, that's
what drives this resilience?
That's actually true, and I think these two words, hope, which translates into imedi in Georgian, the name of a propagandist terrible machine, and dream, which translates as otsneva, and there's a Georgian dream ruined. And also we learned that we don't live with hopes and dreams. We have one country and we live and fight. And while we fight, there is two possibilities, to win it or to lose it. But when you fight, it's still not decided. You are in the struggle. And I think this is what's going on right now. It's hard to answer what drives, as I said, there is not so much like thinking that, okay, tomorrow or in a month we are going to win this fight, but might it also happen tomorrow? The thing is that we don't know any other way other than fighting. We don't want to give up. This is the country which has, for the last little bit more than 3 decades, like during its independence, like the sweat, the blood, everything. These people, just regular people, the farmers, the teachers, the journalists, everyone of this country did everything to build it and to bring it where it would finally get closer to its, aspiring place in the EU and got finally this candidate status. And it's not just a political thing for us, but it's also sort of a guarantee for our independence and our security and the well-being and so on and so on. So, when you do so much for something, you don't want to give up. You cannot give up. So that's what keeps us here. And I think when speaking of solidarity, it's also very important to mention that this solidarity is not anymore just profession connected, but all the people who are in for this independence and freedom and democracy of Georgia, we feel like united, like it became our new profession to be a citizen of this country, the defender of this freedom. And we are here. And about, if you will specify the journalists, we do face extremely harsh attacks and so on, but also this is being a journalist and doing what we know how to do is something that we can and we are doing, and we are not moving out and often we get asked about going in exile because, every step, everything, doesn't matter what you do, actually very innocent thing you can do, and that can be used for starting investigation against you, for arresting you or charging you. I mean anything and everything. There are so many legislations because they did everything to overwhelm you, so you are all the time busy thinking about all those things. So we just refuse to, and we are trying to just do our work and stay here because we feel that this is the only thing that stops this consolidation of authoritarianism, because we are here, we are not living. And let's see, I mean, everyone has one life, but also everyone has one country. And at this very moment, it's the moment when, we are thinking that our one life is worth risking for our one country. So I think when talking about the trends, it's also very much, as my colleague said, Khatuna said, as Katie said, it's like we cannot ignore that international trends are going to have its own, and probably the biggest effect and biggest influence will be international trends, because also when the Georgia got its independence in 1991, it was not just one country's breakout or something being like getting it right. It was also a huge global political trends that caused the crash of the Soviet Union and so on. So we are very much connected to this. But also one thing with the region, what differs us, and I often say it, it's not like with Azerbaijan, for example, there is not so much of leverage for the international community because Azerbaijan has these resources and so on, and there are political games, and unfortunately our colleagues there are struggling very far, more difficultly than us. But with Georgia, because the majority of people here are pro-European, for democracy, and we are still fighting. And this is a small country which still depends. And as Katie mentioned, our government is still, the Strasbourg court decisions and other things that are mandatory, like they are still somehow obeying it, and there are still tools. And also we should not forget that the man behind all of this is oligarch who cares the most about his money. So there are obviously tools that could be used to support Georgia's democracy, but also it's not one country's democracy thing. It's all about democracy at all and human rights at all, and what kind of world we are going to live tomorrow. So we are doing our own fight in this struggle, in this common huge thing that's going on worldwide. And I think it would be really, it is really important, and it really matters that people in other countries, especially in the EU countries, also wake up and start fighting before it reaches them, before they are in the position that we are in, because it's easier when you start fighting before it's too late.
Thank you very much, Irma. We are really over time, and I feel very bad for keeping you here, but we have one question from the audience. So I think that, okay, I see that Katie already answered that. If anybody wants to comment on this as well, but I think Katie would be a perfect person to answer this question. So yeah, thank you very much. Any other comments? Any further final remarks?
Yeah, I wanted to actually, because this question is about the protest and resistance.
Yeah, about yes. Just very briefly.
Yeah, very briefly, when it is asked and wherever I am, I always want to, point out that we are journalists and we are doing our job. We cannot be politicians and we cannot fight some different field. So of course there are challenges, and whatever playbook we talk about, we should always remember that everything starts with the ruler or the group in the power trying to eliminate the political spectrum and eliminate the opposition or any even potential political leaders and so on. So this is what's happening, and then it's become more and more difficult. But why we are the last? Because we are between the as journalists, full consolidation and whatever is left. So I think rather just support whoever is remaining, and we just follow the flow. We cannot answer many questions regarding the strategic protest and so on. We are strategic in our work as journalists, and we try to continue our job. However, we don't have that much political power in this.
Thank you very much, Irma. That's my final remarks. Speaking of solidarity among journalists and newsrooms in Georgia, a new very important crowdfunding campaign was launched, which is called Zviad Media. Batu Melevi is part of it, and I shared the link. I will share it again. I hope that all attendees can see this. If you would like to support Georgian media, you can do it through the Zviad Media campaign, and hopefully we'll keep supporting them in at least raising awareness about this campaign internationally. And it was really good to also discuss the ways of resistance to some extent, and I have a feeling that in the future we need to devote more time to discussing the ways to resist. Thank you very much, everybody. I think this was a really interesting discussion, and also the situation is really one would say that's really catastrophic, but it's important that we are all doing our share.
Thank
and
you.
We're doing what we can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.